Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hey everyone, welcome to Night Vision. If this is your first time joining us, I'm Renee Barnett. I'm your host. And tonight, of course, I'll be joined by our historian, James Martin, just shortly. And we're going to be talking later on tonight about dark and scary places. Some of them that we visited ourselves, some from ancient stories, some from modern stories. And we hope some of your stories, because a little bit later, we're going to be opening up the phone lines. We'd love for you to call us and join us with your story, or if you have a question about some of the things that we're talking about. So we'd love to have you. But tonight, I'd like to start out commemorating the passing of someone very, very prominent in our community, and that is the Rennie community, the historical area of southern France that we're so much into, where James actually lives now. I'm talking about, of course, Henry Lincoln. And many of you know that Henry Lincoln started out researching that area when he was working for the BBC in the 1970s. And he did a series of documentaries illustrating the strange hilltop village of Rennes-le-Château that you've heard us speak so much about, and for which Rennes is pretty much named. And that book, those series then later developed into a book with co-authors Richard Lee and Michael Bagent. And that book, which was released in 1982, was a bombshell. It was considered, particularly at that time, to be so controversial because it called into question some of the ideas of Orthodox Christianity and certainly of the church itself. Also introduced the idea that there might have been a possible marriage between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and also the idea that Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute, but was stood alongside Jesus and was one of the main disciples, and of course the one with whom he shared the most of his knowledge. So that was very, I think, freeing and inspiring for particularly young girls, because I remember reading that at the time and thinking, wow, maybe women, can be seen in a different way, because as we lift up, Mary Magdalene's image, it seemed to somehow lift up the image of women, at least in my heart and mind. But Henry, years after writing the book, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, moved to the region and lived out the rest of his life in a beautiful house in Rennes-le-Ban with his son Rupert and his daughter-in-law Julie. And so he was always like a permanent fixture. Every time I would go over, you would always see Henry around, and he was always game to go out exploring and to show you things that he had found, or show you things that he wanted to question you about to see how much you knew. But it has been a great ride. He had a wonderful long life, and there he is right there. And that's a painting that was done, which, Henry pretended that he hated because of the symbolism of the spear, sort of symbolizes the spear of destiny. And there's some other symbolism in that painting, as you will see well. But I think he really liked it. And it was painted by a good friend of his and a friend of mine, Tim Walton. And I love that painting. And there's the original is huge, but yet, as I was reminded by Tim today, it's actually unfinished. He wants to do some more work in detail. And on my Facebook page, if any of you guys are interested, you can go over and see the photograph from which he worked to create this painting. But yeah, a lot of memories involved. And of course, it's not that long ago that we lost our beloved Tim Wallace Murphy. And there you see the two of them together. Now, I believe that was about in 2011, possibly as late as 2013, on a trip that I made with my dear friend, the late Gloria Amendola. We gave a conference, and we also were in the midst of a big tour, but we had Henry and Tim come and speak at that conference along with some other people. And it was absolutely a great day. But one final picture, that's me and Henry, me much younger and cuter and chubbier, and oddly with a completely different hair color than I have today. But I love this picture, and I thought I would share it with you. And we want to say to all those who loved and miss Henry Lincoln, please accept our condolences. And James, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say here, or if that pretty much covers it. But certainly could not go without mentioning such a prominent passing. Are you muted?
I might very well be muted. Hi, everyone. I think after a very difficult week globally,
yes,
it's the passing of someone can hit people very hard. I know that for a lot of friends and very close friends, this particular passing has been absolutely devastating for them. And I just thought out for family and friends, and perhaps I always think when someone passes, just a little time with reflection for the family and those who were very close to Henry is important.
Yeah, I got a lot of messages yesterday and today, sort of people mourning that never met Henry, sort of mourning the lost opportunity now to ever get a chance to have a conversation. There's so many researchers out there. I can't tell you over the years. It's like, oh, I need to talk to Henry Lincoln. I need to give him my ideas and this, that, and the other. And some people did manage to have that audience with Henry in that conversation. And so, but those days are over now. And what we'll look to is the body of work that he left behind and the spirit that he generated, the spirit of interest that he generated in the area that we love so much and we can't stay away from.
Renee, for me, there are two keys to immortality. One is for the living, which is never admit you're too old to learn something. And the second is when someone passes, it's very difficult because it's if only I had just done something, or if only I'd spoke to someone or asked them a question. The key to it all is, and the key to immortality in a way, is the way that person's influenced you, the way that that person's made you think about things. That influence is then spread to others. And in that way, their message, their inferences on you, the way that you change when you meet people, and the way that you then affect others, younger people, and that kind of stuff. That really is the legacy, and that really is immortality. In that way, little parts of us never die.
That's true. That's true. As long as people are still talking about you, certainly you're still around. But goodness, anyway, our most heartfelt condolences go out to all friends and family and fans of Henry, who were many throughout the world. And so hopefully the rest of us can step in and fill some of that gap and generate new research, find new facts, and make new discoveries in honor of those that have gone before us, like Henry and Tim. And, they're some of the original researchers in the area, at least since I've started into this subject matter, which was back in the 80s, as I mentioned. So many are gone now, and it's we really need to cherish them while we have them here with us, but certainly remember them when they go away. So, all right. Well, I think I mentioned last week that another colleague of mine, another podcaster, had mentioned that a lot of his fans would say to him, "Oh, this show, your show, is like a break for me from everything that's going on." And I said to him, "Well, that's funny because I feel like my own show is a break for me. I hope it's a break for everybody else, but certainly it is a time to kind of put everything that's going on out there aside and turn our interest to things that intrigue us, and some people might think that looking at dark places or evil places might not be something you want to do when there are bad things happening in the world and when we're maybe not in the best mood or maybe a little down. But honestly, my curiosity about these places generates the excitement for them. And just like, when I'm in my at night when I'm ready to go to bed, I can't just go to sleep in the quiet. I have to have something playing in the background, and it's usually, I've racked up a series of YouTube videos to play one after the other, and they're all about murder and mayhem and everything else. And people say, "Oh my God, how do you go to sleep with that? Or why would you want to sleep with that on?" But for some reason, it relaxes me. And so I'm hoping that even though we're going to be talking about scary and weird places, that it is entertaining, informative, and gives people a little break. So,
well, I know that my grandma, when I used to stay with her, had a police scanner, listening to police traffic, and would happily go to sleep, but then suddenly wake up to something going on.
Girl after my own heart. That's funny. That is funny. But, there are places, obviously, throughout history that have been sort of deemed as dark or cursed or something of that matter. And, when we were talking earlier, we were talking about, there are different reasons that places can feel or appear to be very evil or bad. Some of them have to do with, a haunting. Some of them have to do with something horrible that happened there and left residual energy. And then some places, I think it's just in the land itself and has always been there, has nothing to do with spirits or a haunting per se, but more something that is not human and maybe has always lived and that we just absolutely do not understand. So we're going to be talking about all those types of places tonight, because each place that we talk about has its own little place in the dark zone. Shout out to the dark zone there. And so did you want to start, James, with, do you have a place that you're dying to tell about, or do you want me to launch into some of the ones, and certainly tell any personal stories that you have about places, whether they're a famous place or, whether it was your grandma's basement. You know what I mean?
Well, if it was my grandma's basement, she'll have had to have done quite a bit of digging because she didn't have one. But Well, that I know of, which is even more terrifying.
Ooh.
No, it's one of those things, and yeah, I think this of all weeks, personally, it's good to get away from, perhaps some of the more serious, the history and some of the other things, that form part of my day job, into some of the things that, yeah, are just weird and wonderful. I'll start. There most certainly is somewhere that when I started to read about places I wanted to go, so this is in my early teens, the first place that scared me, that I've still never been to, but when I think of it, brings me into a bit of terror, and that is over at Roanoke Island, over on the American eastern seaboard. And there's many anecdotes, reading through ghost stories and all of this, that say that this land is cursed and all the rest of it. Now, whether or not that's based in any reality, I don't know. But for me, when I was reading about the story, and this is, for those who are watching the show, you can see the famous etching there, and the note Croatoan that was etched into a tree. For me, it was almost like, I don't know, not quite time travel, but imagining myself in the situation that those people found themselves in. This second colony, you've got Walter Raleigh and all of these people that we've heard about in history. But it's the fact that they disappeared. And last week we were talking about the Roman legion that disappeared, and we might get onto that in a little bit. I've got some pictures to show you. But what happened to them, and there is this great mystery. But imagine the absolute terror of having you're in a strange, faraway land, months away from home, and you're surrounded by the great unknown. So what do you think about this? And and it's always been the United States in this period. It's sort of looking over your back garden, or looking over into the fields that you own, and knowing that there's no one like you looking back at you. There's no English settlers, as you're looking west, but there are people there. And without going into the some might describe as genocide that occurred with a lot of the Native Americans, it is a phrase that I would associate myself with. That fear of the unknown and just how dark it is, honestly, when I was little, sent me into absolute terror. And whenever I've been to the United States and visited various paranormal places, it was from there that I put myself into the shoes of the people of the time. We've done lots of shows. We did the Conjuring House, Renee. Did a show about that, and again, I remember, imagine what it would have been like as that house was being.
Interestingly, we did do the Conjuring House live stream. I believe last Halloween. Was that last Halloween? I'm losing track of the time. Maybe it was Halloween before last. I don't know. It was during the pandemic, though. Yeah. And well, no, we did Halloween at the Queen Mary, but we did another show. Our first show was actually at the Conjuring House, so that was the year before. Anyway, but Andrea Perrin, who is on a show that precedes this one, was one of the original residents. She was a child living there in the house. Now, Andrea says that she does not get evil from that place, from the house anyway. But I think we kind of came up with some stories and legends about that area. And also, if I'm not mistaken, sort of came to the conclusion there was something about some of the land around there, partially to do with ley lines and their placement and that sort of thing. So, and I remember the idea coming up of again, something that's always been there and not alive. Is that your recollection?
Yeah, and I think that's it. So, if you think about Roanoke and then you think about the area around the Conjuring House, perhaps some of the imprints of what we might feel or we might pick up as being haunted or evil or accursed or something like that might come from the fear and the hardship that people were going through at that period in time. And maybe that leads into that sort of memory, that feeling entrenches itself in buildings and all of that. A lot of haunted places are usually near water, some places where there's lots of iron in the ground and things like that. And perhaps it's a sort of memory. I don't know. But it's interesting. That was the first for me, Renee. That was the absolute first place that I thought, is it cursed? Is it an evil place, Roanoke? Probably not, but it did get me in the mindset of, I wonder whether the fear that those initial colonists had, and the fear, of course, of the people already living there, whether or not that entrenched itself into the area. And it might account for some of the paranormal sightings that have been seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one location for me, it surprised me when I was there because although I understood the history of the place, I wasn't expecting, any sense of it to hit me when I walked inside the building. But I'm talking about Saint Cecile Cathedral in Albi, France, and that, as you know, James, is where a lot of the Inquisition. People were actually tortured inside the church up on the upper level. Not to mention, it's beautiful inside. There's an image of it, and thank you for that, James, because I forgot to upload one. And it's a beautiful church. It's beautiful on the inside. It's a lot of blue. And ordinarily, I think I would have admired its beauty. But one really weird thing is around the altar, there's a huge mural on the wall of people burning in hell. And they're being tortured and they're crying out. And it's just the most awful looking thing. And it was so striking to me to see it in a church, which, to me seems like should be a place of comfort and not scaring the, what out of people. But that's just me. But I will say that, excuse me, I've been on subsequent trips where people that have been with me, usually people I was guiding around, had wanted to go there. And I will take them there, but I will not go inside. I just don't like that feeling at all. But maybe you could shed a little bit more light on not only what was going on right there at St. Cecile, but what was going on in general around Albi and around, southern France at that time.
Well, southern France was a collection of semi-autonomous states. You've got counties of Toulouse, you've got the county of Foix, county of Barcelona, and these states had been set up by Charlemagne as a buffer between the Islamic Caliphate, or the Moors, as we call them, and the rest of his empire. Now, those states had continued as France began to form, and France doesn't look like we would see it today. It's really centered in the north. The royal domain is centered in the north, and in the south, these semi-autonomous, relatively small counties and states occupy the Mediterranean coast and then into the Pyrenees. The area, full of trade from the Mediterranean and a lot of tolerance for different belief systems. The second largest Jewish population, for example, outside of the Middle East, was found on the Mediterranean coast of France. Places such as Alet-Laban, not too far away from Rennes-le-Château, had a relatively large Jewish quarter. It was very prosperous, very tolerant. It still is very tolerant today. Area. And there was a dualist group. And what I mean by that is, as above, so below. But a group of followers really of the someone called Bugu. We call them Bogomilists, but essentially they were Christian, but just had a different way of looking at things. Instead of believing in heaven and hell, and we're sort of in the middle, these people known as the Cathars believe that we were in hell, so the only place to go is heaven. They believe that Jesus was a prophet and things like this. But to the Catholic Church, who wanted to stamp its authority on Europe, having lost a lot of ground to the Viking pagans and things like this, wanted to stamp their authority. And the kings of France wanted to expand their territory. And what happened from there is, in the guise of stamping out heresy, the North and the Catholic Church invaded the South in what's called the Albi, so the city where the Cathedral Church of Albi that you just mentioned, Renee, is based. It's called the Albigensian. Now, it's a very complicated way. It just means the people of Albi. You could call it the Cathar Crusades if you want to. There are a lot more people than just the Cathars brutally murdered in this crusade. So the Albigensian Crusade, and it's named after Albi because Albi was a centre of this Cathar belief system, this dualistic belief system.
Well, it was actually a great sort of almost melting pot at that time of different thought. Everybody lived together, in peace, pretty much. Different ways of thinking, different philosophies, different religions represented. And that just was not acceptable, to the King of France, who basically was controlled by the church. Now, have you been inside Albi Cathedral? I think you have not.
I haven't been inside Albi Cathedral.
I think we ought to go sometime just to see. I should just see how you feel about it. If it was just a one-time thing, or if it really does contain a lot of residual energy. If you can imagine people being tortured and burned and all kinds of unspeakable things going on in a church. Well, it makes no sense.
In Britain, we have a TV show called Monty Python's Flying Circus. You may have heard of them.
I have.
And they do a very famous sketch of, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. I just look over my shoulder to make sure there's no one ready to jump out. But the stabby time, yeah. The Spanish Inquisitions become famous, but actually the Inquisition started in France. And it started under the guise of someone called Dominic Guzman, or Saint Dominic, who founded the Dominican Order, And the idea behind the Inquisition was to root out the heretics, the Cathars. And what would essentially happen, so in a town like Albi, the Dominicans would turn up and they would ask the population, or they would give an ultimatum that said, you confess your sins, otherwise you're invited to the next church barbecue, and you are the principal item on that particular menu. And in Albi, it's worth noting that I always, for places that I've not been, I always like reading the official guidebooks, because usually they're full of nonsense, and usually they're full of the sort of Hollywood story of a place. No exception here with the cathedral at Albi. And the guidebook says, aware of his responsibilities as bishop, lord and city, Lord of the City and Vice Inquisitor of France. He intended the cathedral to proclaim the supreme grandeur of God, the solidarity of the Christian faith in the face of Catharism, those heretic Albigensians, which have not been entirely eradicated. And when you look at the cathedral, sorry, guys, I've got to go serious history for a second. When you look at the cathedral, an image is just up on screen. What you'll note is that the windows of the cathedral are very high up. In other words, this is less a cathedral or a basilica, as we should really call it. It's more of a fortress. The idea being that you're protected on the inside from those outside. It's stamping a face of the church over a town or a city that used to have some heretic elements. Heretic just means free thought, really. And it wasn't just the Cathars who were then burned. I mean, I don't really want to dwell on the idea of people being burnt alive or anything, but that's what happened. Executions. Actually, Catharism ended up going underground, and it became more of a nocturnal thing that the belief system would occur at nighttime in woods and things like that, and
Caves.
perhaps survived to this day. Caves, who knows? But that was the idea, and it's not just at Albi. I've heard many people say that they felt very uneasy at the cathedral at Albi, but also at Béziers.
Béziers got completely mowed down, the whole town. That was the kill them all, God will know his own location, I believe. That the Pope Innocent
it most
said.
Certainly was, yeah. That was a person called Arnaud Armory, from memory, who had said that, and quite a horrendous thing. The Grand Prior of a place called Citeaux said, but sire, how will, if we're going to destroy the city, how will we be able to distinguish these so-called heretics from good Catholics? And he responds, Cariterios novitainem dominus qui sunt eius, slay them all, God will know his own.
Gosh.
And that's what they did. People who were Catholics, Jews, Cathars, of all sorts of religious understandings and belief, were torched. An entire city destroyed in the name of God. That staying, I was in Béziers about 6 months ago, and you feel it.
Do you?
Béziers is a Roman city. There were lots of very interesting, but there's that underlying, I know what happened here. And just near the bridge, one of the bridges, you really do get quite a sense of, I'm very uncomfortable with this place. Something bad happened here. Wow. You feel it. It's like a incredibly wet, wearing a woolly jumper and it's soaking wet through. You feel the cold right to your soul, and that's what it's like in Béziers for sure. Albi, I've driven through Albi, an industrial estate which also felt cold, but not quite the same as what we're talking about.
Right. Well, we'll have to go sometime. I'd love to get your take on it, and also we could take maybe some clandestine equipment in there and see if we get any interesting readings in there. But yeah, I mean, the only other time that I can recall having that much of a visceral response to a location was back in 1994 when a good friend of mine and I were out and about around Los Angeles, and we decided to drive by the murder scene of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goodman. And we pulled up. It was on Gretna Green there in Brentwood, California. Beautiful area to live. And we had to park down the block because parking was scarce around there. And this was early, days later after the murders. And as we approached, we got, further up the block. And the closer we got, the more uncomfortable I felt. And we walked up and we stood there. And, of course, we were looking right there at the doorstep where her body was found. And then over to the right, as we looked, would have been where Ronald Goldman's body was and where he was killed. And we just had words, neither one of us. And we said, let's get out of here. And so we, just immediately left and felt really bad and kind of, feeling a little bit embarrassed that we'd even, been so silly to by the famous murder scene, because when you went there, you felt, this is no joke, this is a place where something extreme has happened and where two young people lost their lives in a horrific and brutal and gory way. But that was the only other time that I can recall having felt that kind of like residual energy. And I think in both those cases, that's what we have is in Albie, it's the residual energy from all the suffering and torture that happened back in the Inquisition, back in the 13th century. And then in the case of the murder scene of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman, have the residual energy of a more recent horrific act, no matter who committed it, and I believe we all know who it was, but whoever did it, it was a frenzied, horrible, horrible attack, and the emotions were so high, not only on the part of the victims, but of the killer. So I think that also can leave an imprint. It's not just the suffering, but I think it's the evil energy that's being put out as well that stamps the place. And I think that's more of what we felt rather than the sadness of a loss,
You've just reminded me of two things on the back of that. I just want to respond to Renee in the chat room who's talking about seeing pictures of hooded figures torturing people.
Yes.
Well, just a point on that. It is the case that the Inquisition, the Dominicans, were black robed, and they would be hooded in this way. And
scary as that.
Absolutely, especially at night time, these faces. And I was at a place, Ordsall Hall. I don't think there's a floorboard. I don't know personally in that place. I've been so many times. I had a very bad experience, including being cut and having pins and needles right the way up to my face. I'll just show you a quick picture of Ordsall Hall. It's a beautiful place, and you'll find it in a city called Salford, which is very close to the city of Manchester in northwest of England. It's a Tudor building. Its origins are from the 14th century. But the hooded figure, I had actually saw with my eyes. It's about 2:00 in the morning and sleep deprived. But this black hooded figure covering its face, and someone telling me that when that happens, it's usually a mark of extreme evil and ill will and all of this. But Renee, just on the back of what you were saying there, we've got to remember the victims. When you go if you go around London, you can go on the Jack the Ripper tour, and it's all very exciting and interesting, and you get to go around and have a look at the various places where the murderer/murderers undertook his or her business. And the thing is, at the end, I know it's the great whodunit, who was the murderer, but we must keep in the back of our heads this notion that there were victims. But even going around Whitechapel at night time, looking at the area, which hasn't changed too much, some of it is completely changed.
And Whitechapel, of course, is the area where Jack Ripper frequented and committed all or most of his murders. Was it all of the murders were in Whitechapel? All that we know of.
Yes. Yeah, I think there was certainly more than 5. But you feel it. You really do feel it. Remember, it's probably about 8 years ago, working in London, and had a spare evening. So I thought, why not? It's a cold November evening. Why not go out into the -4 degrees Celsius temperature, as you do, wearing a t-shirt? Not a good idea, I'll just say this. And went round and you could feel, it's almost like you could feel, some of the pains in your stomach and things like that. And a lot of other people experience things like that too. Now, whether that's us being empathetic or whether that's actually something telling us something happened here, I don't know. But what I can say, there is one place that really does stick with me, and that place was in the battlefields of the Somme and in Belgium, the battlefields of World War One. And imagine this: you've got a group of 17-year-old history students on a coach down from Manchester right the way through to sunny Belgium in November. Lots of hot chocolate and all of this is required. Boisterous, lots of noise on the coach, lots of noise in the hotel, lots of noise in the morning, as you can expect, college students, that kind of thing. And then absolute silence when you're in the trenches. And even though it was during the day, there wasn't a shadow cast, there wasn't a bird tweeting. It was just absolute silence. And that same feeling is replicated in the concentration camps found in Poland, Germany, and France, and across Europe. But Auschwitz is especially one of those places where you can feel the absolute torture, the hell and the war crimes that were committed there.
Yeah, I had someone on Facebook when I put the subject of the show. Someone said that that was the worst place they had ever been. They said you can absolutely feel it, and someone chimed in and agreed, and they both said not only can you feel it, you can smell it. They said It's just in there. But we're hoping that later on in the show, we are going to open the phone lines up, and we're hoping that you'll call in wherever you are and share a scary story or two, or just ask a question. But I know someone who I bet has some stories to tell because he lives in this world all the time. And I'm talking about our dearly beloved producer, Bill. Hey, Bill. I know you got some stories. Come on now. We can't hear you.
That's because as a producer, I'm always muted.
I know, as you should be.
Hey, James.
I can't laugh. I did the same.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, I want to talk about 2.
Okay.
One was outdoors and one was indoors. Kind of outdoors too. But there's a location up here in upstate New York. It's called Nuclear Lake. And this place is so odd. I mean, from the moment you leave the old mining road to get to the lake, there's so much animal life, wildlife, period, as you approach the lake. But once you get to the lake itself, and I'm on video, I've went with researchers, paranormal research. It's devoid of life. It's like you hear nothing. There's no birds. There's no animals. There's nothing. It's the most bizarre, eerie feeling. Anyway, on one occasion at Nuclear Lake, and we're going to play that clip, James, if you can hit it for me. We were walking.
You want it now?
Yeah, let's do it now. This way I can sit back the second hour and listen to your stories.
Okay.
But,
okay, here it is.
Go ahead, go for it.
Bill, do you want to introduce it first, or?
Yeah, so I'm walking down the mining road with the paranormal researcher, Al Santoriga. He's the leader of this research group. And a friend of ours, Heidi, who was visiting from the UK. And he says, Bill, I'm picking something off on the side of the woods with his device. So we wander off to the side, and I had a Sony handheld camera, and I put it down on a log because I have Heidi trying to get bug spray out of my backpack because there's ticks in the woods. There's all kind of things. So that's where this video is pretty much taking place at that point when I put the camera down. So poison ivy too. And all right, I'm going to put my camera down a second. When something happens, it's almost like Blair Witch.
Yeah, the mozzies are out in force.
Yeah, you can feel them.
Yep. Can't hear them though, so that means
did you put spray at all, Al? No. So you guys can come back and hang out with me up here, but it sounds like a young woman saying my voice twice. The first one is distinctive. You can actually hear it. The second one is kind of muddled because it's in between Heidi and I speaking. Now,
can we see it again? Because sure. I want people to be aware of what to listen for, because I didn't catch it the first time around. I did hear it that time because I knew it was coming.
Yeah, but it seems like it's saying my name.
So you guys listen, because you will hear very clearly a woman's voice saying, Bill, let's hear it again.
Poison ivy too. And all right, I'm going to put my camera down a second. When something happens, it's almost like Blair Witch.
Yeah, the mozzies are out in force.
Yeah, you can feel them.
Yep. Can't hear them though, so that means
did you put spray at all, Al? No. It's just clear.
Did you guys hear that this time? It was unbelievable. It was so clear.
And that's definitely.
But you didn't hear it until you played it back, right?
Exactly. That's why it was picked up through a device, but we did not hear it at the time. It was only after I went through the footage at home and I uploaded it, and a friend of mine said, Bill, were you guys messing around? Because there sounds like there's a young woman saying your name. I said, what are you talking about? Then when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Oh, wow.
And that happens
now,
so frequently
what was your,
with EVPs.
Yes.
What was your feeling when you were there? Did you have any sense of anything, or?
That place is just eerie from the point, like I said, from the point you enter it to the point you leave. I've had a lot of weird things happen at Nuclear Lake. And without getting into too much detail, they really don't want people going there.
Right.
Any kind of paranormal related activity.
Now, it's called Nuclear Lake because
there was an accident there. There was a facility. I don't know if they were mining. I don't know if it was uranium or whatever it was, and there was an explosion in the 70s, and that's why they deemed the name Nuclear Lake. And there are people who say there is a cancer connection to that lake.
Well,
from the radiation.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised.
Allegedly, that's what people say in the area. But we're all friends here, all three of us, of Tony and Cherie Rathman. Ron
Right.
Iacovetti, Lourdes, and of course the rest of the team. So I went with them to Kreischer Mansion in Staten Island, and it's a well-known location. This place, as you were mentioning earlier, the both of you, about a location having history of really bad things going on. Well, this place definitely has that history. There's talk about a young boy that walks around the property. Family members have died there. This place was once owned by the mafia. And there was a very weird vibe I got with the Rathmans and some others as we approached this shed, because supposedly some really bad things happened in that shed to people. Now, James, I got to tell you, this is it right here. I took this photo of it when I was there.
Wow.
And of
Great
course,
house.
this is the whole team, and there were other teams from other teams, and you can see the Rathmans and then Ron and
on the left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But now what happened, and I was there during the whole investigation. Before anybody got there, I was taken with the tour guide, and he gave me a tour, the house. When I got to the third floor, and I have it on film, I walked under this light fixture, and it started to flash. And I'm like, did you see that? He goes, yeah, I see that all the time. Like, nonchalantly, he explains. He will not go into the house alone. He refuses to go to the house and go inside alone. So he says, Bill, and I said, would you ever stay here? Like, stay overnight? It's no way. So this image, we were in the basement of this place. Now, when you walk down the stairs to go to the basement, there's a piece of wood missing from the staircase, from the steps. And I'm like, and then there was a mark on the wall. And I said, what is that? And Tony or Anthony Simonelli said that's where a murder took place. And the police took it for forensics evidence. So now we're in the basement. They're doing a session. And I hear a noise because I'm filming it. I hear a noise like right behind me. And I'm like, as I'm filming, you see everybody's head or eyes look to that direction. So then we proceed to go in there. And Tony has a device. And he's looking inside a bathroom, and it's just a stall. It's just, it's just got the toilet seat. That's it. And you can't really see it. But that's what he caught on the device. It looks like, to me, it could be two things. It almost looks alien in nature. But
it looks like an alien.
Or someone in coveralls. Do you know what I mean? It looks like that. But there was
here I am all leaned over into the screen.
There was nothing in there. It was just an empty bathroom stall. It was. And
That's
he picked
creepy.
that up. That was really creepy. So, yes, locations, land, spirits, maybe something else. I don't know what that is. But all I know, I was there when it was captured.
It didn't look alive or like it had ever been alive, whatever it was.
So hopefully, I mean, you have to be open-minded but skeptical, obviously.
Sure.
And they were trying to reach all the rational, logical, possible explanations. They're doing it in real time. And I'm observing it. And I'm like, wow. And they really couldn't come up with an answer because they were thinking shadows. It could be this, it could be that, reflections.
I remember when we were doing the Estes method, Renee, last year. Feels like it was only last week. And we were communicating with a variety of things. And it's interesting when you use equipment like that and you use EVPs, just how much you get through. And if you're recording it, it's then when you listen back and you go, I didn't hear that. I didn't get that. And then names. I mean, the chilling thing about it is, how does an entity that's never met you before know who you are?
Yeah, that's a little unnerving.
I don't know. I mean, you guys have been involved with this for some time, the historical aspect and going to all these different locations. There are some people, and I cannot speak to the people that are watching this right now or listening, unless you have an experience. That's when things change, kind of, because there are coincidences. But when things seem to happen, I don't want to frequently. I'll use the word frequently. I don't know if it's the individual that's because of an awareness or open-mindedness, but it's like some people it gravitates to, and some people have no experiences at all.
Well, there could also be some sort of scientific explanation for why some people are like better receivers or transmitters of things like that. I think.
How many times do we hear that it could be passed on from family member to family? It's a lineage. It's in the family.
You do hear that, yeah, absolutely.
That's one of the things we hear about.
I completely agree, and I have to say, in the academic field, discussions like this are laughed at. But here's the thing: as soon as you have an experience that you can't rationally explain, that's it.
You ain't laughing no more.
Yeah, I just think it's like this. Lots of people don't notice symbols in artwork or right in front of you, just because we're not attuned to it. And when you have that first experience, it's almost like you've just been tuned in and you see things in a slightly different way.
Absolutely. And that's why I think a lot of people can identify, because I think at least 65% of individuals living in the United States believe that in the existence of extraterrestrials. I'm just using that as an example. I think that once you have an experience, now you really are asking a lot of questions and you're trying to find out information by listening to programs like this to see if there's anything that resonates with the person when they're having, when they're listening to a show. Because I do it. I even do it as a producer. I'm always in tune because I want to hear the information that the hosts are providing or the guests, because it might be something that actually has something to do with my own personal situation. Or
sure. Absolutely.
Well, I know that when we come back from the break, we've got a little musical recording that when I tell you what happened with it might send some chills.
Well, and I hope I didn't blow that with my sequence of stories. Probably should have saved the Albee Church, and I realized that later. But anyway, I think it's great anyway. I think we should hear that bit of music and the history behind it.
Well, we're going to go to break now. So, Renee, you can take us out. But before I say that, you can call in at the second hour of the show, 855-472-5483. So it's 85-KGRA Live. So make sure to call in about some of the stories. If you had an experience, call in and share them with Renee, James, and the audience. And definitely me. Because while you do that, I'm going to be sitting back and enjoying the second hour of this show. As I joke with them behind the scenes, I'm going to grab some munchies and enjoy this show as well. So, all right, Renee, take us out to break. And James.
All right, guys, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it.
Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button. So just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, the KGRADB.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Well,
Okay. That sounds a little spooky to me.
yeah, and especially when you know the content of the context of that. That was the hymn that the Crusaders used to sing just before they launched an attack on you. So quite often that was the last thing that people could hear before they lost their lives. And when you listen to it in that context, but it's interesting that even some music and some songs seem to have the ability to conjure things. There were just some chants that I remember being in one investigation, again EVP. We could hear, and we could hear it actually, just very low key. Ring a roses, pocket full of posies, and you're in a very darkened room doing a haunted investigation, and that sends chills up your spine.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Where was that?
That was at Hyde Town Hall. Hyde is in Greater Manchester, in again the northwest of England, a very old building, and it was at that point, people were saying on the investigation they could see a child, and people. It looked, it was very dark, so your eyes might play tricks on you, but it looked as if people were just walking around, going about their business in that place with this very low level kid song. Really creepy.
What is it that it makes it sort of more scary or creepy if it's a child's voice, or even if it's a child? There's something very, sort of sweet and innocent about kids, and you just don't want to see or hear them in that way. Although sometimes I think it can be kind of sweet. Some people who've done investigations or just had an experience, will talk about an interaction with a child that seemed very sweet, like playing ball or, taking a doll from somewhere or something like that. So, but there is something unnerving about a child's disembodied voice.
I think it's the innocence and all of this. Kathy's just mentioned to seeing the chat about didn't that song have something to do with the Great Plague? It was a Gregorian chant that was used in many different scenarios, but you have just given me, if I might, Renee, my next creepy place, which is affectionately known as Vampire Island. And this is just off the Venetian Lagoon, Venice, Italy. And this place is, I have to say, up there with the most terrifying places that I've not landed on, and I'll explain why in a second. But I've been in a boat around, and yeah, it's an absolutely horrendous place. So this is an island, and its proper name is Paveglia, I think is how you pronounce it. I might have butchered the pronunciation of that. But it was used by refugees who were fleeing from various attacks by Venice's enemies, namely Genoa. Residents would flee there. As I say, refugees would land there. But it's when we get to the 1500s that it became a plague colony. So ships were loaded with plague victims. This is after the big outbreak of plague. It still came back across Europe. And given the fact that Venice is it's in a lagoon, it's ripe for the spread of plague. Anyone who was sick or dead were transported over to the island, and it gets its name Vampire Island because when people have dug there, and there's not too many people who've been, I'll explain in a second, they found that some of the dead had stones in their teeth, as if in their jaws, found within the skeletons that were uncovered there. And for those watching, here's just one example of one of the mass burials, plague pits as they're known. And plague pits are all over Europe. Various different outbreaks from cholera to Black Death, but this particular island it gets creepier. Now, I'll just explain that when in Venice, unless you are, I don't know, a millionaire, you're not going to get any of the gondolas or any of the canal taxis to drop you off or even go near the island. The locals avoid it. One of the other reasons for it being avoided is there's a few things. Well, one, there was this belief that there were demonic entities that would pull you into the lagoon around the island itself. But, of course, it can't be a creepy place without me saying that on top of the plague victims, there was also what was called a lunatic asylum. Now, the word lunatic is not the language we use today. It actually comes from people who like looking at the moon too much, but a psychiatric hospital is what we're referring to. And the stories go from people who survived this, by the way. I mean, this is 1922, that in that hospital, experiments were undertaken on people with psychiatric illnesses, lobotomies, experimental brain surgeries, some stories of people having chisels and hammers above their eyes. And the director of that facility, allegedly and apparently, ended up losing his own mind and threw him off the clock tower above the institution, killing himself. Now, since 1968, the place has been totally abandoned, with the exception of a handful, I believe, of film crews. So I know that Yvette Fielding in the UK went over and found some very disturbing EVPs, sites and all of that. But I have to say to you, just even approaching nearby the island, it's not that you have a feeling, that place is probably, I would call it quite an evil island. Death, experimentation, some of the stories of the inmates in the institution there, of screaming that they could see entities, they could see things, and then they would be similar to Alcatraz, which we'll probably get onto shortly, but would be put in solitary confinement and end up being absolutely crazed or disheveled because they could see entities in solitary with them.
Wow.
And, a place that's accursed, most certainly is that island.
Oh,
For
my
sure.
goodness. We seem to have a lot of people having lots of sort of ghostly experiences in the chat room. I think Sean says that he's got a ghost right now that visits him on a nightly basis, which he calls a ghost cat because it jumps on his bed like a cat. But a really interesting story from Renee said that he was on an airline flight, and his father had recently passed, and he said he felt a tap on his shoulder, and his father said hello to him, and he said he knew it was his dad because he spoke to him in their native language in Tagalog. If I'm mispronouncing that, Renee, please forgive me. I've heard it pronounced Tagalog, and I'm not sure which is correct or if either are. But anyway, the native language of the Philippines. And then he said, he turned back around to see if he was sitting there, and there was no one there. So that was kind of interesting. But those are kind of not so bad or not so evil experiences. I mean, I wouldn't mind having a visit from my mom or dad just to say hello. But anyhow, yeah, there are so many places in you were talking about, suicides, and, I know that there's that place in Japan called the Suicide Forest. And I think it's pronounced Aoki Guhara Forest, where they have so many suicides constantly, so much so, and it's been that way for a long, long time, that I don't know if there's any Japanese speakers or readers watching, but I believe this is the sign that urges people, if they're suicidal, to seek help. And it looks like it offers a phone number there at the bottom. But it's a very strange and isolated place. It almost looks like an enchanted forest, but a little bit on the dark side. But I'm not sure if the place itself is evil, or if, because of its isolation, because it's a huge, huge forest, it, offers a place for people to go. And once the word has gotten out about the, sort of popular suicide spot, people just continue to go there in even bigger numbers. And then now when people do go there, they do talk about, sort of a dark and eerie feeling, but possibly that's more of that residual energy, unless it's just a place that is evil and it sort of draws you there. And then once you're there, it, works on your psyche somehow to entice you to join the forest, maybe. But
that's what I think with that forest, there were some local legends around some demonic entities sort of tricking people into the forest. And it's interesting that around the world you find these stories of places where demonic creatures or other creatures end up. I mean, I had the great fortune to work with some brilliant people, followers of the Islamic faith, and we used to talk about the jinn. And no, not the you might drink, but the cave of the jinn was another place that had a huge warning sign that people would either, if they were to go into that cave, would either be haunted by these entities for the rest of their lives, or tormented by these shadowy figures or things like this, driven mad, suicides, etc. Very similar to the really Western, I suppose, but around the world you still find them. We would call them shadow mans. Now, I'm not going to mention someone who has something on their head. for the very superstitious belief that I have, which is that's one way to summon that particular entity. So I'm not going to mention it on air, but I think we all know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think I do for sure. And I'm not going to say it either. If you're not going to, I'm not going to. But yes, there are many places like that around the world. I was looking into one place in actually Siberia called the Evil Cave of the White Shaman. And that cave is, obviously very, very old. And it has a history of, cavers going in and not coming out. Particularly, there was one group of students who were going in to explore the cave and do some scientific tests and things. And I forget, there was like maybe 20 some odd that went in, and only 2 came out, 2 women. And one of those, her hair had turned completely gray, as the story goes. And then the other one, I think, died shortly after. And then, there was a lot of stories, and it was sort of, a popular bit of sort of folklore or legend around the area. And then there was a time when it didn't seem like anything was happening. And the people in the area were kind of disappointed because that was their sort of scary story. They missed the mystery. But later, another group went in, and literally, sort of the same thing happened. So an actual scientific study group, very prominent, because although I haven't done a lot of research on this location, I did look into the group that went to investigate, the scientific group, to see if they could find, a scientific explanation for it and why, it affected people, because they were hallucinating. They were mass hallucinating. They were, just totally driven insane, some of them. It was just a variety of things, but they were, all being affected in some way. And some of them in exactly the same way. So the scientists went in, and they wondered whether or not there was some sort of a sound that could be determined. And they did find that there was something that sort of vibrated at the frequency of, I think it was 6 hertz or something like that, which is supposed to have very ill effects on the body. So that may explain some of it, but it certainly seemed that there was a lot going on there. But they could not figure out where that sound was coming from or why it was emitting that sound. And wherever it was coming from, it was deep, deep, deep underground, and they couldn't get to it to find, the origins of it, or the starting place, or where that sound was emitting from.
I know that.
Have you heard anything like that?
Yeah, I know that flowing water can sometimes give infrasound. For example, there's a walkway. It was the world's first underwater tunnel that was built by Isambard Kingdom Brunel. We don't name people like that anymore. He was a very prominent engineer in Britain in the Victorian period, and he built a tunnel underneath the River Thames in London. And if you can walk the walkway, it's free to access, or at least it was when I went in to it. It's a bit of a long walk, and about halfway in, people begin to experience paranormal activity. The look of someone just over their shoulder, something like that, and various tests have been undertaken. And the idea is infrasound. It's just outside and just inside human hearing, and so what your mind does is tries to locate where the noise is coming from and create something for you to see. Now, that's explainable with the River Thames that flows just above. But equally in places, caves are a key one. I think it was in Siberia as well. Some very deep mining, open cast mine, where they could hear things like screams and things like that coming from the earth. Now, I've not been able to verify that particular story is being true, but it's certainly a legend. And some, for any listener, you might be able to correct me on where that is. But I do remember. Renee, I'm going to attempt to read out a US telephone number. What do you reckon?
Oh, well, it's pretty easy.
Okay, I'll try.
I would say.
If you're wanting to call in with any of your experiences or anything like that, join me and Renee in having a sit back discussion about evil places. If that ticks your particular box, then you can call. Lines are open. First show that we've ever done anything like this. It's just an option for people listening, but the phone number is, so if you're calling from overseas, it's +1. And then it's 855-472-5483, which I think is 85 KGRA live.
I believe you're correct in that. Again, that number is area code 855-472-5483. So if you have something you'd like to share with us, or if you have a question for us, give us a call. James is right. This is the first time that we've opened the phone lines on this show. So we're hoping to hear from you and hear what you have to say to us. But yes, there are so many places that are so strange. You reminded me of another place that I hadn't thought of. And I've mentioned this general locale on the show several times because there's a lot of weird stuff in this area. And I'm talking about this area around Tahlequah, Oklahoma, which, as some of you may know, is, the capital of the Cherokee Nation. And, but there's a place that is 13 miles outside of Tahlequah, a little community called Lost City, which, is a very intriguing name. And they tell me that the reason it's called Lost City is because anytime you try to drive out there, even though it's a straight road 13 miles out of town, you get lost. You get lost every time. And for some strange reason, there are a lot of weird things around there. There's, happens to be a French monastery there, which is very interesting. We won't go into a lot of detail about that on this show, but we have before, and we certainly probably will again. But there's also a cave out there called the Cave of Treasures, and it's supposed to be inhabited by some sort of monster. And first of all, to get to the treasure, you have to go past the monster, and you also have to be right in your intention. You have to be pure of heart, and you've got one chance. If you don't make it, you'll never have another chance again, and you could end up killed. But regardless, even if you survive it, you won't be given another opportunity. And so that reminds me very much about, some of these other caves that, are supposed to have an entity, like you were talking about the jinn, sort of like a demon guardian, which is a term that's familiar to us in the Rennes-le-Chateau milieu, the documents, the so-called, scrolls that were found there that reference a demon guardian. Or was that the Serpent Rouge with the demon guardian? Anyway, it's in there somewhere. But yes, that was certainly one. And, but then we have other places like, where there seems to be some sort of, and now it's difficult to figure out if it's some sort of residual thing or if it's just inherent in the land. But I'm talking about an area in Utah, which is not the only place, that known as the Path of the Skinwalker. Now, what we've become so familiar with over the past years is the Skinwalker Ranch, and well known because of all kinds of odd activities that have gone on out there, and people have reported going on out there. I remember when it sort of first burst onto the public consciousness was back in 1996, when at that time it was known as the Sherman Ranch, the Skinwalker Ranch. And it was situated in this area, which is known to be by the, is it the Ute tribe there, as the path of the Skinwalker. And a Skinwalker is, you hear varying descriptions, but it seems to be someone that may have lived, and it was usually like a powerful medicine man or someone like that, someone who had abilities in life, who maintained those abilities in death. And I guess they became even stranger and darker, and they could shapeshift into an animal, or they appeared to be, sort of part human, part animal. And that's why, like, for instance, the Navajo people, who also have this theory of these skinwalkers, they don't wear, animal pelts of predatory animals. It's okay to wear something with a beaver skin or, some other animal, but not a wolf or not a predatory cat, a wild cat or anything like that, because they don't want to, sort of induce that skinwalker energy, and they believe it can bring them to you. And not only that, you might end up one, when you pass on to the other side. But certainly back in 96, I was working on a television show with Paranormal News Magazine called Strange Universe. It's actually my first TV job. And but a friend of mine who was a journalist at the Deseret News in Salt Lake City wrote an article about this ranch. The newspaper, his editor, had instructed him to find something spooky for Halloween, around Halloween. And so he heard about this ranch, and he interviewed the Shermans about the things that were going on. And the things that they were talking about it sounded like interdimensional activity, like things would sort of manifest out of the sky and come through like a hole. Animals would be killed, and, all kinds of really, really weird things happened. And huge public interest, built on that. And then a Las Vegas billionaire who also had an extreme interest in the paranormal and such, named Robert Bigelow, bought the land. I think he paid a lot for it. Or maybe not. Maybe they sold it for less than market value, because I know they really wanted to get out of there. They wanted to get their kids out of the house. The Shermans did. Anyway, sold the ranch to Robert Bigelow, and Robert Bigelow moved in, a team of scientists to investigate and to do tests and try to figure out, what was going on there. And so we all thought, oh, wonderful. Now we're going to find out. So they did all this work, and they never did really release much information about their findings. What they did tell was then put in a book. by George Knapp, and I'm totally blanking on the co-author who was one of the scientists, and I beg his forgiveness. Excuse me. But that was all the information that they would give. And I knew that there was tons more, but they were keeping it under wraps. And I remember later when I was working on Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura, that show we wanted to do and did do a show on the Skinwalker Ranch where the guys went out there and everything. But I tried to get George Knapp, who's, a public figure, he's a newscaster in Las Vegas, or was. I guess he's still doing news. Also, he's a recurring host on Coast to Coast, very well known, most famous for his work with Bob Lazar in Area 51, and because George was the guy that Bob sort of stumbled into the news office and said, I got to tell my story. And George took it and ran with it. And that became a very famous story. But then I think that was one of the reasons why Robert Bigelow, who's also, a resident of Las Vegas and obviously knew who George Knapp was, and knew of George's interest and his openness, even though he, was a news person, a news journalist, a hard journalist, and who was fairly skeptical. I think that's why Robert Bigelow sort of tapped him to write this book. And but I remember when I was doing the show, I begged George, to come on. He goes, no, I've said everything. I said, George, you've got a book out. Everybody goes and does interviews about their new book. He goes, no, we've said everything there is, that we're going to say publicly. And so I don't know if there's anything more that's been released since then, because that's been a few years back now. But I know it was frustrating for many of us because we wanted to know what the heck is going on out there.
I remember reading that, and just saying as a sort of listener and consumer, I suppose, listening to that, going, oh, come on, what's next? I don't think that the full tale was told, but the Skinwalkers just remind me so much of. I mean, we did a show not that long ago about vampires. I mean, you've got the shape shifting into creatures. You've got the ability to disappear. The connections with Earth and things like this. And again, indigenous tribes or indigenous peoples to a particular area, knowing where to avoid. And all of this. I mean, I would love to know what on earth is going on, because again, it's one of those, people who have been close to the sort of boundary of the area have been told to leave in a variety of ways.
Yeah. It was cordoned off immediately after it went into the hands of Robert Bigelow, and you couldn't get anywhere near it. And it was almost like the things that were going on there after, like people reported seeing like big government trucks and things, which was odd on the property. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I heard many, many people say they personally saw these trucks. And I'm not sure, what was going on with those. We may never know the full story. I mean, I imagine there'll be some time when that property will change hands again. Unless, like there is something really, really weird going on there and the government, seizes it or, takes it over. But don't know. It's a very strange place, but it reminds me of another sort of situation similar to that near my hometown, where I grew up in southeastern Oklahoma. there's a large lake near my hometown called Lake Eufaula, which is actually a man-made lake. And but I remember when I was a little girl and the lake was built, and right out there on Sunday afternoons with my parents to look and see the progress and that sort of thing. But there was something about that area that Native American tribes, of which there are many in the area, will not go on that area of land, and they certainly won't swim in Lake Eufaula, even though that's sort of why it was built, to be a big, resort area for the region. And a lot of people go out there with their boats and water ski, and there's swimming areas that are roped off, for kids and others. So it was for up to have fun, but yet there were people who wouldn't go anywhere near the place. And one of the stories that they would say, the reason is because there was a monster that now lives in the lake, and that it will, pull you under, and that, there have been people that had disappeared, while swimming, or, a boating accident or something like that. But it was funny because I didn't know that story until actually I was grown up, and, we're talking to some people from different tribes who talked about it. But I was talking to my family about it, and my mom said, "Oh, I wonder if that's what I saw that day." And I said, "What, Mom? What are you talking about?" And she says, "Well, your dad and I and some other couple went fishing." And she said, "We were sitting on the bank." And she said, "They all went down the bank and were fishing." And she said, "I was sitting there, with the picnic stuff." And she said, "And I looked out and I saw this creature in the water." And she said, it was very weird because it almost just stood up. It came up very high, and then it went back under and just swam away. So there you go.
Wow. You just reminded me of another place, just with you saying about the military at, the Sherman Ranch, Skinwalker, whatever name we want to call it, of the town. We've been stopped from going on a few occasions. That's postcode is 666.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And that's the town in the Pyrenees called Perilos. And there's a picture of the church at Perilos, a very strange place. Population in Perilos, 0.
There you are at the door.
I've never seen behind myself. Oh dear. But yeah,
that's when you were testing the energy there. With what was that device? I mean, because I don't know anything about the devices. I know I should, but is it just a electromagnetic measurement? Is that what it does?
Yeah, basically. So you've got you've got KT meters, and then you've got flux, not capacitors, but magnetic flux readers. And what they do is I can't afford a triaxial one, but this just scans in one direction, not the boy band, different magnetic fields, and the strength of it and the change of the strength in the magnetic fields. The K2 meters, Tesla meters, Gauss meter, they're all the same thing, really. They're one bit of equipment. This checks for field density. And the one that I was using there was a KT, essentially to have a look at the intensity of EM radiation. and the meter that I was using there could tell whether or not something was coming close to you or further away, or you were going close to it or further away.
Oh, I see.
And what I'd found at that church was something that was swinging, like, like a, I don't know.
Was
like
it swinging or was it pacing back and forth?
Originally, firstly, it was swinging. Then whatever it was, that you're looking at a screen, you're looking at a reading, and it went away. It moved away from the door, which was sealed shut. It then returned, and it looked like it was pacing from left to right, and then it stopped, almost as if it had clocked that someone was outside. I think it was me, you, and a friend outside. It then walked away and then came back and was pacing and then disappeared. And I remember looking at a friend who'd gone ice cold. I mean, the temperature that day was baking hot. I mean, absolutely
it was very hot. Summertime.
Really hot. And yeah, ice cold. I thought, this isn't right. I've been here before. And then, well, there were two things that happened. I'd never seen a negative reading on this device. And then it looked like whatever it was running at the door, to the point where I stepped back because I thought, God, the door's going to come off. It didn't. It's almost like it hit the door. And that's where and that's where we all discovered that the meter had a health warning and was sort of shutting down. Get out of the place. There's a danger to life. What on earth? I didn't know it had. There could be a danger in this way, but it's very
crazy.
unusual. Yeah, it's very
unusual. I was there. I mean, it happened. It's weird, and aside from the place, the name Perilous, invokes, perilous, and the zip code or the postal code for the place is 66600, as you mentioned, just too weird. But also, the place has a reputation for being dark, for being not welcoming at all. Many times you can't even get into the village. It'll be blocked off for some reason. And, I've had friends that have been up there and have had very negative experiences and would never, ever go back anywhere near that village alone. I don't know if they'd go back at all, but they certainly wouldn't go back alone.
Well, the first time I attempted to get there, it was under a military cordon. Or it was under a cordon that the military had imposed over a variety of years. And I mean, there wasn't any way up. I mean, this is an abandoned village. The excuse that was put on the flimsily put up notice was danger of fire. So I thought, well, it's stone. I mean, stone doesn't tend to ignite, but anyhow,
maybe it does in Perilous.
Maybe it does in Perilous. But what was really unusual about that was, as there's two vehicles. As a few people are suggesting that somehow we start moving these huge boulders with our cars, which wasn't going to happen. I don't think the cars could shift them. A cyclist then cycles straight past the cars, straight past these boulders on the access road. We're warning in our best French, you can't go up there, etc., etc. You can't go up there. And he doesn't even acknowledge us. He cycles up to a place that I think he thought he was hidden, but we could see him. And all he was doing was staring at us.
Ooh,
so
the water.
Yeah, we kind of got the hint.
And you said cyclist. So was it a bicycle? He was
Yeah.
on or a motorcycle?
It was on a bicycle. You couldn't get past this road, very narrow road, a sort of cliff to the left and a bit of a cliff to the right. So you couldn't get by these boulders in a car. However, what he did was go right around just the edge of this sort of cliff, one misstep and it would have been quite a bad outcome. And
Wow.
he went up like this. I mean, this is 4 kilometers from the town by driving, by the way. That's where they've sealed it off. And the path the road went up to the right, and there was a dirt track, I now know, to the left, and some trees, a handful of trees. There really isn't much that grows there. So it's sort of rock and, a few short trees, that kind of stuff. Well, I assume he thought he was hidden. And when I've driven up there and had a look, I think from where you would stand or whatever, you would think you're concealed, but you weren't. And just staring directly at us. We ended up... it gets creepier. We ended up heading to the nearby town of O'Pool, which gets its name from the Hope Pool, famous family in Rennes mystery and all that. The Castle O'Pool, the High Pool, that kind of stuff. We get into this village and there's not much by way of a cafe or restaurant. There's one, and we stopped, had a coffee, and I remember asking the barmaid, why was the village abandoned? When was it abandoned? And the answer was during the war, and it set on fire. And that was it. There's your drinks. And as I'm settling down, coffee, thinking, well, what do we do now? We've got a full day ahead of us and we've got up early, what do we do? I noticed when I turned to the left that same cyclist is head round the corner, just round the road from where there's coffee, round the corner. You could see the front wheel of his bicycle staring at us. So if it's not weird enough already, we then go round that corner. He cycles away. I'm thinking, I want a word with you. He goes away. We end up in the mayor's office and ask the mayor, what happened to, why is the
why is it closed?
Reason for the book is because extreme fire risk and all of this. I would suggest that you go to this following castle, which was about 40 kilometers away, and that's that.
Wanted to get you out of there.
Well, that's exactly what happened. Out we've got to go. Then the door's locked. Restaurant shut. Middle of the day, and during eating time in France, it's eating time. And we're right in the middle of that. Everything's is shut down. What on earth's going on? And then started to read a little bit more about it. There's lots of things, lots of rumours, stories. I had found out about this place through reading, and I'd spoke to a friend who had been up, had flown over to visit Rennes-le-Château for the first time, had heard in conversation about this place. I thought, at this point, I've been coming here for, at this point in time, 6-7 years, and no one's told me about it.
Oh, wow.
And he and his girlfriend hadn't told me until I'd mentioned this strange experience that I had at Palace. Well, he said that he drove up and he was in a hire car, parked up, I'd managed to look at the abandoned village of Perilos, and just as he started to walk up to where the church is and where some of the buildings are, the alarm in his car started to go off. Now, this is a hire car, so he's panicked thinking, oh, what have I done? Anyway, couldn't find anything. So they carried on going back up, and the alarm went off again. So this time, locked it, and he and his girlfriend thought, right, okay, we'll take it in turns. Now, the alarm didn't go off then. So they thought, right, we're safe. They start walking up the ramp up towards the church, and he describes it as being pushed over at the door, as if there was a wind coming from a shut door that pushed him back. So he's hurt himself, all of this. Now his girlfriend then says the alarm and the car's going off just at the point that he's been pushed. She goes back, nothing wrong. And by the way, at this point, the story is described as she's gone back to the hire car and hasn't touched anything. She hasn't got the keys with her, but it's gone off as she's gone back. She walks up, and at this point, another James, by the way, he sat down, nursing his knee in his back, that kind of thing. She goes up to the door of the church and is pushed back. Unfortunately for her, she ends up spraining her ankle and spends the best part of the rest of the day in the hospital of Perpignan.
Oh,
now,
my goodness.
I know that there's at least 2 or 3 mutual acquaintances of ours that have had very similar stories to that.
Yes.
And when we made it up to this church to find out what the hell's going on, it was creepy, and we were being watched. Not just that,
the gendarmes came.
Exactly.
And they weren't very friendly. I was trying to make, small talk, and they just, were being very officious.
If you want to go into the church, we say Mass on a Monday.
Right.
Who's got the keys? Well, this other person's got the keys. So I remember you going over to this person. Who's got the keys? Oh, well, it's the gendarme. Well, then we've got the other
which,
thing.
in case some people don't know, the gendarme, or sort of like a military type police, is that a good description? Yeah. I mean, there's the police, and then there's the gendarmerie. The gendarmes are different than the local
just
police.
Bearing in mind, we're parked, leaving the, not very well kept road. I mean, the place is abandoned. We're well off the road, so much so that the gendarme could actually drive up into the abandoned village,
right?
And talk to us. There's then a lot of beeping of horns, and the impression is leave now. The excuse being
you're in the way.
Vehicle can't get by.
Right.
And when you look at the tales of that area, it's arid. There's barely anything alive there, and yet over the valley is a place called Terre Salvache, land of our Saviour. And there's plenty of rumours of various biblical characters, shall we say, having ended up in that area. And that's the area is protected.
Which direction is that? Where is that from Paralos?
It's in terms of cardinal points, I believe it's sort of north and west slightly.
What would be the nearest town or village?
Well, I think you're heading in the direction of Durban, where I think Sonia, Abby Sonia's brother.
I thought that was in South Africa.
There's more than one. There's 2 Washingtons too.
Wow.
And Boston's for that matter. But yeah, it's there's lots of connections allegedly with the Abby Sonia and the chateau. For me, it's the number of churches that are in the area. In this completely arid place.
Yes.
The population, 30 or 40 at tops. You've got 4 churches.
Yeah.
Actually, the 5th is in the abandoned village. The Lord of Perilos apparently went to purgatory to find his overlord, didn't find them. And then when I read where he'd gone all the way to Ireland. And of course, there was an Irish flag in the abandoned village too. The place gave me the creeps. So many unexplained. So many unexplained.
But isn't it weird because they don't want anyone there, but yet there's this little sort of carved out area there, the little picnic table area. Remember where we were sitting? It's like I don't know what that's all about. If they don't want people around, it just seemed.
No, and
odd.
apparently, behind the sort of garage doors to where we were sat, there was or is, a sort of makeshift shop where you can get some bottles of water and other such things. I'm not sure when you're meant to go up
I
there.
don't know when it's ever open, but
I think it's abandoned. I think it's abandoned for everyone who doesn't know about the area, is what I would suggest.
Yeah.
But I've never felt unwelcome by both the living and whatever else is there. It was
exactly.
very
Whatever.
odd, dark place.
Yeah, I knew about that place for many, many, many years, but the first time I ever went there was with you when we went that time and took those measurements and things. But I always had a sense of foreboding about it, even before I ever went anywhere near it.
Well, I heard stories after we'd been actually about yes, but there's a demon in that church. What?
Yes, you do hear that.
You could have told me before we went up.
Thank you so much. Yeah, sorry about that. But gosh, you know what? We've used up our time, it looks like. And thanks so much for being with me, James, to go over some of these creepy places.
I think it costs
really
quite.
Interesting.
I think of all the places that we've spoke about, I think it costs quite a bit in airfares to get to visit them all. But you should, go and visit these places, have an experience yourself.
Yeah, and just like some of the places that I mentioned, having gone near my home, there might be someplace right in your own back. You know what? Got to night. Got to say goodbye for now until next week. Come back and join us again. Take care.
See you later.
We love you.